Stand at the gates of the Elms on Bellevue Avenue, and the house before you glows. Limestone catches afternoon light. French windows gleam. Formal gardens stretch in geometric perfection to hoard a marble tea-house that could have been transported from Versailles. Beautiful. But beauty is architecture's most effective lie. Behind those walls, a 96-year-old woman spent her final years pressing buttons on a Victorian call box, summoning servants to maintain systems that should have died with the 19th century. Coal furnaces roared in 1961 while America reached for the moon. Maids scrubbed floors by hand in the television age. 40 people woke before dawn to operate a household designed for a world that no longer existed. The Elms was never just a summer cottage. It was a machine designed to transform industrial brutality into aristocratic legitimacy. A palace built with Morgan's capital and miners' blood. A facade so perfect that it convinced America that beauty could make you immortal. This is how the Elms was built, how it survived, and what it reveals about the price of beauty, when beauty is all you have to prove you belong. If you enjoy deep explorations into the forgotten mansions and families that shaped the most extravagant era, please support this documentary by liking and subscribing. And if you have your own insights or stories about these estates, I'd love to read them. Now, let's step inside. Philadelphia, 1848. Johann Paulus Berwind makes pianos for people who never worry about paying for them. His workshop smells of varnish and horsehair. His customers arrive in carriages. His family lives in modest rooms where 5 sons share space and German is spoken at dinner. Augusta Berwind raises her boys on discipline and a single message repeated until it becomes instinct. In America, background matters less than what you accomplish. Work harder. Speak correctly. Never acknowledge that you started from nothing. The third son absorbs this completely. Edward Julius Berwind, born June 17, 1848, grows up watching his father as Hans build instruments for Philadelphia's elite while understanding he will never belong to that world through craftsmanship alone. Different rules apply to piano makers' sons. Different doors stay closed. Then, at 17, something extraordinary happens. President Abraham Lincoln personally signs papers appointing the immigrant's son to the United States Naval Academy at Annapolis. How this occurred isn't entirely documented in surviving records. Someone with influence recognized potential a Philadelphia politician, perhaps, or a military connection who saw discipline in a boy whose father built pianos one careful piece at a time. Lincoln's signature changes everything, not because the Navy offers wealth, but because it offers legitimacy. Annapolis doesn't care that your father assembled soundboards. It cares whether you can master navigation, engineering, naval tactics, and mathematics at a pace that breaks weaker students. 4 years of rigorous training. Graduating June 1869 as a midshipman. Promotion to ensign in 1870. Master equivalent to lieutenant junior grade follows in 1872. Service during the Franco-Prussian War provides international experience. Meeting the Prince of Wales as an ensign delivers something more valuable, a connection to European royalty that will prove useful decades later when an American coal baron tries to convince Newport society he deserves a chateau modeled after French palaces. Assignment as a naval aide at the White House during the Grant administration brings proximity to men who actually run the country. Proximity is currency. Every conversation is education in how power operates at levels his father never glimpsed. But military pay is modest. Advancement is slow. And in May 1875, at age 26, placement on the Navy's retired list ends active service. Records cite a service-induced disability without specifying details. The pension, roughly $150 monthly, will continue for life. The career is over. What he's gained is less tangible than a fortune, but more useful than connections alone. He's learned how hierarchies function, how men of breeding speak and move, how to recognize which rules can be bent and which are absolute. How to operate in rooms where everyone understands that background is never mentioned, because everyone present has the right background. He doesn't have the right background, but he's learned to perform as if he does. Back in Philadelphia, his older brother Charles has already found a different path to success. Starting as an office boy at age 16 at the Powell Coal and Iron Company, Charles rose through sheer competence to vice president by 21. In 1869, he left to start his own operation. 5 years later, partnership with Judge Allison White created a firm that bore both their names, Berwind White Coal Mining Company. The timing is perfect. Coal is transforming America. Railroads consume it by the trainload. Factories require constant supply. Steamships burn it crossing the Atlantic. The industry is expanding at a pace that makes early investors extraordinarily wealthy. Charles understands this. When he needs help managing rapid growth, his younger brother, fresh from the Navy, with organizational skills, leadership experience, and knowledge of how powerful men operate, is the obvious choice. Learning the business takes years. Not the physical labor of mining, which he'll never perform, but the strategic side, securing land with proven deposits, negotiating contracts, understanding which customers pay reliably and which don't, building relationships with railroad executives who buy in volume, undercutting competitors when necessary, recognizing that coal mining isn't about extracting rocks from the ground, it's about controlling supply at a scale that makes you irreplaceable. The work requires intelligence, ruthlessness, and patience. In January 1886, formal incorporation creates Berwind White Coal Mining Company. Charles holds the presidency. Judge White provides legal expertise and political connections. Edward, after a decade mastering every aspect of the business, becomes a full partner. Then in 1890, Charles dies suddenly at 44. The question of succession is immediate. Who can step into leadership of an operation that now controls multiple mines across Pennsylvania? Who understands both operational details and strategic vision? At 41, the former naval officer takes control. Under his leadership, Berwind White will expand from a successful regional operation into something far larger. An empire built on coal that will eventually control over 100,000 acres and make its owner one of the most powerful industrialists in America. But building that empire will require more than business acumen. It will require partnership with the most powerful financier in the nation, willingness to crush labor opposition, and the kind of wealth that buys entry into circles where piano makers' sons don't normally belong. The transformation from immigrant family to American aristocracy is about to accelerate, and it begins with a partnership between a coal baron who wants legitimacy and a banker named J.P. Morgan who wants efficient monopolies. Pennsylvania sits on billions of tons of bituminous coal. By 1890, Berwind White controls an expanding network of mines extracting it. The business model is straightforward. Secure land with proven deposits. Open operations. Lock in long-term contracts with railroads and factories that consume fuel by the trainload. Success requires three things: scale, efficiency, and access to capital for aggressive expansion. John Pierpont Morgan provides the third element. The most powerful financier in America doesn't invest in small operations or sentimental partnerships. Morgan orchestrates consolidations that turn fragmented industries into efficient monopolies. He's done it with railroads. He's doing it with steel. Coal is next. The arrangement with Berwind develops through the 1890s based on mutual advantage. Morgan's capital funds rapid expansion. Berwind delivers operational competence and reliable returns. Neither man wastes time on sentiment. Results come quickly. By 1903, Berwind White controls 105,000 acres of coal-bearing land across Pennsylvania. Production reaches 2.5 million tons annually. Profits hit $8 million, roughly $270 million in today's terms. The town of Wangber-Berwind spelled backward, rises in Somerset County to house thousands of miners and their families in company-owned housing. 13 new mines opened in that county alone during 1897. Company stores sell supplies at prices the company sets. Company doctors treat injuries the company causes. The system is total, but the human cost is steep, and it's documented in payroll records, strike reports, and newspaper accounts from mining towns where Berwind White operates. During the 1902 coal strike, Berwind White cuts wages up to 54%. Striking workers receive notices, 5 days to vacate company housing. Families move into tent settlements while replacement workers are hired. The company refuses to recognize unions. Its mines remain open shops long after competitors accept collective bargaining. The label "robber baron" appears in newspapers. Berwind seems to wear it without discomfort. Morgan's backing opens doors beyond coal. Directorships at approximately 50 companies follow: railway companies, banks, steamship lines. Involvement in the New York subway system alongside Peter A. B. Whittener. Seats on boards that control critical American infrastructure. By 1900, journalists count Berwind among the 58 men who rule America. He's 51 years old, unmarried, no children, immensely wealthy, and profoundly aware that in America's most exclusive social circles, industrial wealth still carries the stench of factories and labor disputes and immigrant origins. Newport, Rhode Island, changes that calculation. Not Newport, the charming colonial seaport. Newport, the summer capital of American aristocracy, where Vanderbilts and Astors build cottages that cost millions, where European nobility visits and is entertained in ballrooms that rival Versailles, where the right address on Bellevue Avenue announces you've arrived at a level of society that transcends mere wealth. Berwind wants that legitimacy more than anything Morgan's capital can directly purchase. In 1898, he acquires property on Bellevue Avenue. Not a cottage, not a house. 4 acres of prime Newport real estate where he will build something that announces his arrival with architectural precision. The choice of architect is revealing. Not Richard Morris Hunt, who designed the Breakers and Marble House and stamped his aristocratic vision across Newport. Berwind selects Horace Trumbauer, a Philadelphia architect only 28 years old, still building his reputation. Why Trumbauer? Because Trumbauer understands what Berwind needs. Not just beauty, but a specific kind of beauty. French, classical, so perfectly executed that it erases questions about the owner's background by overwhelming observers with architectural legitimacy. The model is chosen: Château d'Asnières, an 18th century French palace outside Paris. Not a Loire Valley chateau tourists recognize, something more sophisticated. A choice that signals knowledge of French architecture beyond obvious references. Trumbauer will adapt, not copy. The result will be pure French classicism transplanted to American soil with precision that makes the imitation undetectable. But to understand what the Elms actually cost, in money, in labor, in invisible human effort, you have to see what most visitors never glimpsed. You have to descend into the infrastructure. Stand in the entrance hall of the Elms and look up. Coffered ceilings soar. Marble columns frame the space. French windows flood the room with light, filtered through silk curtains. The grand staircase curves upward with the kind of grace that seems effortless. It isn't effortless. Step past the showpiece rooms, and the other face appears. Behind the beauty lies infrastructure, systems, machinery, the industrial reality required to maintain the illusion of aristocratic ease. Deep in the basement, boiler rooms the size of small factories burn Berwind's own coal to heat the entire structure. Pipes snake through walls and under floors, carrying steam to radiators in 48 rooms. The system runs constantly from October through May. Coal delivery happens weekly. Tons of it, hauled down ramps to storage bins, then shoveled into furnaces by men who start their shifts at 4 a.m. so the house is warm when the family wakes. The power plant generates electricity for the entire estate. One of the first homes in America wired completely for electric lighting. But electricity in 1901 doesn't arrive through utility lines. It S-generated, on-site with massive dynamos that require constant maintenance. The hum is continuous. The machine room is staffed 24 hours. Water comes from the city system, but requires pressure regulation and filtration before it reaches upstairs bathrooms with their marble tubs and gilded fixtures. Basement pumps maintain flow. Holding tanks ensure supply during interruptions. The kitchen operates at industrial scale. Multiple ovens, roasting spits, ice boxes the size of walk-in closets, refrigeration rooms that require daily ice delivery blocks, weighing 50 pounds each, hauled through service entrances, positioned in wooden-lined compartments designed to keep food cold without electric cooling. Adjacent, the scullery, where an army of understaff wash dishes, polish silver, scrub pots. The scale is shocking. Dinner parties for 50 require china service for 60, crystal for 80, silverware counted by the gross. Everything must be spotless. Everything must be counted. Nothing can be broken, scratched, or misplaced without explanation. The laundry occupies its own wing. Industrial washing tubs, drying racks that stretch 30 feet, pressing rooms with irons heated on coal-fired stoves, bed linens changed daily, table linens after every formal meal, towels, napkins, staff uniforms. The volume is endless. 3 full-time laundresses work 6 days a week, hands raw from lye soap and boiling water. Service staircases connect every floor. Narrow, steep, unadorned. Staff move along these arteries unseen, so fires are lit before dawn. Breakfast appears precisely at 8, and rooms are cleaned while the family occupies other spaces. The parallel circulation system was designed to maintain the illusion that the house runs itself. It doesn't run itself. At peak operation, the Elms employs 40 people. Upstairs, butler, housekeeper, ladies' maids, footmen, parlor maids, chambermaids. Downstairs, chef, kitchen maids, scullery maids, laundresses, coalmen, engineers' grounds, head gardener, under gardeners, stable hands, coachmen. Total annual payroll, approximately $18,000, roughly $600,000 today. That's just wages. Add uniforms, housing for 11 staff, meals, medical care for injuries, and the cost doubles. Total annual operating costs, approximately $40,000, equivalent to $1.3 million today. That's what it costs to run the Elms for 1 year. And remember, this is a summer cottage, occupied May through September. 4 months of use requires 12 months of staffing to maintain readiness. Compare those figures to the context. In 1901, the average American worker earns approximately $400 annually. A skilled tradesman might reach $700. A factory worker with a family survives on $500 if work is steady. The Elms' monthly operating costs exceed what most American families earn in a year. But numbers don't deliver the sensation. Stand in those basement corridors, and the truth becomes physical. This parallel world was designed to remain invisible. Architects placed service entrances at the back. Staff housing occupied the 3rd floor under eaves, where summer heat reached 95 degrees. The beautiful rooms stayed cool, tall ceilings, cross ventilation, windows designed to catch ocean breezes. The machinery that made the beauty possible stayed hidden, hot, loud, and operated by people whose names appear in payroll ledgers kept at the Newport Historical Society, but never in society columns. Domenico Russo, master mason, 42, from Carrara. James Whitfield, lead carpenter, 51, trained in Edinburgh. Michael O'Brien, 28, general labor, Irish immigrant, wages sent home to County Cork monthly. Their hands built this. Their lungs breathed the coal dust in the boiler room. Their backs carried the marble. Their labor invisible, unacknowledged. Essential transformed Edward Berwind's industrial fortune into aristocratic legitimacy. In Newport, that transformation had a specific name. They called it arrival. Ground breaks in July 1899. The site is raw land on Bellevue Avenue. And Trumbauer's plans specify materials that must travel thousands of miles to reach Newport. Indiana limestone from quarries that supplied government buildings. Shipped in blocks weighing 2 tons each, loaded onto rail cars, transferred to barges in New York Harbor, sailed to Newport, then hauled by wagon up Bellevue Avenue to the construction site. Each block numbered. Each position predetermined in architectural drawings, so precise that masons work from blueprints more detailed than naval ship plans. Marble from Italian quarries. White, rose, gray. Cut to specification overseas. Crated in sawdust, shipped across the Atlantic. The entrance hall alone requires 40 tons. French doors and windows fabricated in Paris. Glass from Belgium. Hardware cast in bronze at Philadelphia foundries. Copper roofing from Montana smelters, rolled in sheets, shipped in coils weighing 600 pounds each. Nothing improvised. Nothing local except labor. The workforce peaks at approximately 200 men. Stonemasons from Italy who've worked on cathedrals. Carpenters from Scotland who understand timber framing. Ironworkers who can forge decorative grills matching French designs. Painters, plasterers, glaziers. Roofers specialists imported because Newport doesn't have enough skilled craftsmen to execute work at this level. They work 6 days a week, 10 hours daily. Wages range from $2 for common labor to $5 for master craftsmen. Good money by 1899 standards, but the work is brutal. Limestone blocks require 4 men and a pulley system to position. Marble installation demands precision. A single crack ruins a $500 piece. Copper roofing happens in summer heat that turns metal into something that burns skin through gloves. Injuries happen. Domenico Russo, the master mason from Carrara, falls from scaffolding in August 1900. Broken leg, 6 weeks recovery. No compensation beyond his regular wages, which stop the day he can't work. Michael O'Brien drowns in September 1900 when a barge carrying limestone overturns during unloading. The body is recovered 3 days later. Burial at public expense. No family found. His name appears in a logbook kept by the construction foreman. General labor, Irish, wages $2 daily. Drowned September 14, 1900. Account settled. Account settled. The house rises. Month by month, the structure takes shape. Limestone walls. Mansard roof line. Dormer windows. Chimneys. By winter 1900, the exterior shell is complete, and work shifts inside where craftsmen can labor through cold months. Plasterwork consumes months. The grand staircase requires carved mahogany imported from Honduras. Flooring parquet in 12 different patterns arrives, pre-cut from workshops in France. But installation requires masons who can make seams invisible. The ballroom ceiling gets hand-painted medallions, each one taking days. Electric wiring snakes through walls before plaster goes up. Innovative for 1901, but dangerous. Workers drill through joists, thread heavy copper cable, install junction boxes without modern safety equipment. 2 electrocutions during installation. Survived, but hands scarred permanently from burns. By spring 1901, exterior landscaping begins. The grounds require transformation from raw land into French formal gardens. Terraces, pathways, marble pavilions, fountains. Topsoil hauled in by wagon. Trees transplanted mature specimens that take 8 men to move. Grass, seed by the ton. Hedges planted in geometric patterns that will take 3 years to reach designed height. The sunken garden gets Italian marble balustrades. The tea house, a separate structure, uses materials matching the main house. Fountains require underground plumbing, pumps, holding tanks. The entire water system is engineered to create ornamental beauty without visible infrastructure. Total construction cost, approximately $1.4 million, equivalent to $48 million today. But the house isn't finished when construction ends. Berwind spends additional years filling it with contents that transform a building into an estate worthy of European aristocracy. Venetian paintings, Renaissance ceramics, Oriental jades, Louis XV furniture purchased from estates across Europe, Sevres porcelain, Aubusson tapestries. Each room curated to demonstrate knowledge of European art history that Berwind himself doesn't possess, but employs experts to acquire. The message is clear. This isn't an American industrialist playing at European aristocracy. This is a residence that could exist in France without alteration. The only concession to American context is the electric wiring and central heating technological advantages that Europeans will envy. July 1901. The Elms is complete. Berwind throws a housewarming. It becomes legendary in Newport society. 300 guests. Orchestra brought from New York. Champagne flown from France. Dinner served on china, commissioned specifically for the occasion. Each piece bearing the Berwind crest that has no actual heraldic legitimacy, but looks authentic enough that no one questions it. Caroline Astor attends. The Mrs. Astor, whose approval grants entry to New York's most exclusive circles. She tours the house, examines the art, and reportedly tells Berwind, "You've built something magnificent. Not, you've bought your way in. Not, how nouveau. Just acknowledgement that the facade is perfect enough to pass inspection." And it is perfect. Every detail executed flawlessly. Every room photographed for architectural journals. Every garden path designed to offer new vistas. The Elms becomes one of Newport's showplaces, proof that a piano maker's son with Morgan's his backing and Pennsylvania coal money can build something indistinguishable from French aristocratic heritage. But perfection has a cost that extends beyond construction budgets. Maintaining this level of beauty, sustaining the illusion that it's effortless, requires a machine that runs constantly, consumes resources at an astonishing rate, and depends entirely on invisible labor. How long can it last? That question never appears in society columns celebrating the Elm's success. But in the basement, where coal men shovel fuel into furnaces at 4 a.m., and in third-floor servant quarters where summer heat makes sleep difficult, the question is implied in every drop of sweat, every strained muscle, every paycheck that arrives only if you're capable of working. The machine runs. The beauty glows. And Edward Berwind, at 53, has finally achieved what he wanted most. Acceptance into a world that would have never acknowledged him based on the piano maker S workshop where he was born. But acceptance isn't the same as belonging. And beauty built on this scale requires constant feeding. What happens when the fuel runs low? Newport, summer 1905. The Elms is at its height. Not just operational, but celebrated. Architectural Digest publishes a 12-page feature. European nobility visiting America adds the Elms to their tour itineraries. Mrs. Astor's endorsement opens every door that matters. Edward Berwind, now 57, has become exactly what he designed himself to be, an American aristocrat whose industrial origins are acknowledged but no longer define him. Coal built the fortune. The Elms transformed it into something that looks like inherited privilege. The summer season runs May through September. 4 months when Bellevue Avenue becomes a stage for social performance that determines who matters in America's wealthiest circles. Typical week at the Elms. Monday, arrival from New York on private rail car. Staff has been preparing for 3 days airing rooms, ordering food, arranging flowers. The house must appear ready without visible evidence of preparation. Tuesday, afternoon reception for 50. Ladies in summer whites, gentlemen in linen suits. Champagne served on the terrace overlooking gardens that 6 groundskeepers maintain in perfect geometric precision. Conversations about yachting, European travel plans, who's building what where. Wednesday, dinner party for 24. 8 courses. Wines selected by Berwind's French sommelier. Service by footmen in livery. Crystal chandeliers blazing. The dining room accommodates 30 comfortably, but 24 is the ideal number, large enough to demonstrate scale, small enough to maintain conversation quality. Thursday, tennis in the morning, lunch at the casino, evening at someone else's estate. Friday, preparation for weekend house party. 12 guests arriving for 3 days. Staff double-checks guest rooms, linens, flowers, writing supplies. Books carefully selected to match each guest's interests. Saturday, Monday. House party. Breakfasts at 9. Activities through the day. Formal dinner Saturday night. More casual Sunday. Departures Monday morning. The machine runs flawlessly. Guests see perfection. What they don't see, the butler waking at 5 a.m. to supervise breakfast preparation. The kitchen staff working since 4 to bake fresh bread, prepare eggs to order, brew coffee, set up the buffet. The chambermaids who've already cleaned guest bathrooms, emptied chamber pots, still used despite modern plumbing in some rooms, replaced towels, restocked toiletries. The coal men who've been shoveling fuel since 3:30 a.m. because even summer mornings in Newport can be cold, and the house must be comfortably warm before anyone wakes. The gardeners who arrive at dawn to deadhead roses, trim hedges, sweep pathways, remove any leaf that dares to fall on the perfect lawn. The laundresses who wash table linens from last night's dinner, iron guest sheets, press staff uniforms. By the time Berwind descends for breakfast at 9, the household has been operational for 5 hours. By the time guests compliment the seamless hospitality, 20 people have already worked a full shift. This is what $40,000 annually buys. Not just service, but invisibility. The erasure of labor from the visible experience of wealth. For Berwind, it works. Society columns mention the Elms regularly. Invitations arrive from families who would have never acknowledged a coal baron a decade earlier. His sister Julia, 10 years younger, serves as hostess after their mother's death. She manages the social calendar with precision equal to any military campaign. But beneath the golden surface, pressure gathers. Berwind never marries. No children. No direct heirs. The coal fortune will pass to Julia and their siblings when he dies, but the estate, this perfect machine, has no next generation trained to operate it. More immediately, coal itself is changing. Labor disputes intensify. The United Mine Workers grow stronger, despite Berwind White's resistance. Strikes become more frequent, more organized, more effective at disrupting production. Public sentiment shifts. Journalists call him a robber baron openly now, and the label sticks despite his Newport respectability. In 1911, Berwind testifies before Congress about coal industry monopolies. The testimony is hostile. He defends company stores, company housing, open shops that refuse union recognition. He argues that his workers are well paid by industry standards. But when pressed about cutting wages 54% during strikes and evicting families with 5 days' notice, his responses sound calculated rather than compassionate. The transcript is published. Editorial cartoons depict him as a fat plutocrat crushing workers beneath mansions. The contrast is stark. The Elms gleaming on Bellevue Avenue, maintained by 40 servants, while Pennsylvania miners live in company housing that Berwind White owns and can revoke at will. He doesn't seem to care. Or perhaps he has learned that a certain amount of public criticism is the price of being in Morgan Circle. You can't control 100,000 acres of coal-bearing land without making enemies. The Elms keeps running. Gardens bloom. Parties continue. The machine requires feeding, and Berwind's fortune is still large enough to sustain it. But coal fortunes are different from inherited wealth. Industrial money is active. It requires constant management, strategic decisions, market awareness. You can't just clip coupons from railroad bonds and trust the dividends. You have to compete, expand, navigate labor relations, deal with government regulation, and increasingly justify yourself to a public that sees coal barons as villains in a story about American inequality. In 1932, Edward Julius Berwind dies at age 83. Not at the Elms, he dies in New York during winter, but his Newport legacy is secure. He's transformed himself from immigrant son to American aristocrat. The house stands as proof. His will divides the fortune among siblings. Julia inherits the Elms outright. And this is where the story becomes strange, where preservation becomes obsession, where the golden years end and something darker begins. Because Julia Berwind, at 67, makes a decision that will define the house's next 3 decades. She refuses to change anything. Not the outdated systems, not the oversized staff, not the rituals designed for Gilded Age entertaining that make no sense in the 1930s. The Depression has arrived. America has changed. Newport's grand estates are closing, converting to museums, being demolished. Julia keeps the Elms operating exactly as it did in 1905. While the rest of America modernizes, she maintains a 19th century household in the middle of the 20th century. Coal furnaces, hand laundry, liveried footmen, a Victorian call box for summoning servants. She's preserving something. But what? History? Or a beautiful lie that she can't bear to release? The machine keeps running. The cost keeps mounting. And time, indifferent to beauty or wealth, or stubborn refusal to acknowledge change, moves forward anyway. Julia Berwind was born in 1865, the youngest of 5 siblings. While Edward built empires, she managed households. While he negotiated with Morgan, she learned the intricate protocols of Newport society: when to call, how long to stay, which invitations to accept, which to decline, how to orchestrate dinners where conversation flowed and no guest felt slighted. These skills sound trivial until you understand that in Gilded Age Newport, social missteps could destroy reputations that took fortunes to build. Julia's competence was strategic. She helped Edward maintain the legitimacy he'd purchased with limestone and French furniture. When he died in 1936, she inherited the Elms completely. Age 71, unmarried, alone, and she made a decision that still puzzles historians. She changed nothing. Most estates faced immediate transformation after an owner's death. Children sold. Widows downsized. Executors liquidated. Staffs were reduced to skeleton crews. Systems modernized. The Depression made maintaining Gilded Age scale impossible for all but the wealthiest families, and even they adapted. Julia adapted by refusing to adapt. She kept the full staff, 40 people in 1936. She maintained every ritual: formal dinners with 8 courses, liveried footmen, crystal chandeliers lit for meals she ate alone. She preserved every system: coal furnaces in the age of oil heat, hand laundry while America bought washing machines, service bells, and call boxes when telephones were standard. The cost was staggering. Operating expenses remained at $40,000 annually, now equivalent over $900,000 and $1,936. Coal mining revenues had declined. The family fortune was still substantial, but no longer infinite. Maintaining the Elms at full capacity consumed resources at a rate that made no financial sense. But Julia wasn't operating on financial logic. She was operating on something else: preservation, memory, refusal to acknowledge that the world her brother built no longer existed. Or perhaps she understood something darker, that without the Elms operating at full capacity, she became irrelevant. A house wasn't just property. It was identity, purpose, proof that Edward's transformation from immigrant son to aristocrat was permanent. Letting it change would admit it was all performance, that you can't actually buy your way into aristocracy, That beauty built on coal money has the same half-life as coal itself eventually. You burn through it. So she held on. The 1940s arrived. World War II. Staff shortages. Rationing. Newport's other estates closed or converted to military use. The breakers opened for public tours. Marble House became a museum. Rosecliff was sold. The Elms kept running. Julia adjusted nothing. She hired replacement staff when people left. She paid full wages during wartime inflation. She maintained the grounds, the systems, the rituals. By 1950, she was 85 years old. The house was nearly 50, and something had shifted from preservation into obsession. Staff from this period, their accounts survive in oral histories collected by the Newport Historical Society, describe a household frozen in time. Coal furnaces still burning. Hand laundry still required. Footmen still wearing livery. The Victorian call box still used to summon servants, though electric intercoms had been standard for decades. Julia's routine never varied. Wake at 7, breakfast at 8, served in her room. Morning hours spent on correspondence letters written in elegant script, mostly to distant relatives, often reminiscing about Newport summers in 1905. Lunch at 1, formal service even though she ate alone. Afternoon rest. Tea at 4. Dinner at 7:30. Full formal service, 8 courses, staff in livery. She dressed for dinner every night. Guests were rare by the 1950s. Most of her generation had died. But she maintained the protocol, because protocol was what separated aristocracy from people who simply had money. The house itself was aging. Systems required constant maintenance. The copper roof needed repair. Limestone developed hairline cracks. Plumbing leaked. Paint faded. Julia authorized repairs, but refused modernization. Fix what breaks, but don't change what works. By 1960, she was 95, frail, barely mobile, still pressing buttons on the call box, still maintaining a household of 40 people to serve one woman in a house built for entertaining hundreds. The staff knew this couldn't last. Julia had no children, no direct heirs. The fortune was depleting. When she died, decisions would be made by executors who had no emotional attachment to maintaining 19th century operations in the space age. But Julia wouldn't discuss it, wouldn't plan, wouldn't acknowledge that the Elms, like her brother's life, like the Gilded Age itself, had to end eventually. In May 1961, at age 96, she died in her bedroom. The house that Edward built, that Julia preserved for 25 years beyond reason, suddenly had no owner, and the vultures arrived immediately. The will was straightforward. Estate divided among distant relatives. The Elms, along with its contents, to be sold at fair market value. Executors hired to liquidate efficiently. Within days, real estate developers made offers. Not for the house, for the land. 4 acres on Bellevue Avenue. Prime Newport real estate. The house itself was a liability. Outdated systems, massive maintenance costs, no practical modern use. The highest bid came from a developer with a clear plan. Demolish the chateau, build a shopping center. Parking for 200 cars. Retail spaces. Modern, profitable, practical. The offer was accepted. Demolition scheduled for early August 1961. The wrecking ball was contracted. Salvage crews would come first, strip anything valuable, sell the marble, melt down the bronze fixtures, auction the art. That auction happened in July. Christie's handled it. Everything went. Venetian paintings, Renaissance ceramics, Louis XV furniture, Sevres porcelain, silver service, crystal chandeliers, Persian rugs. Catalogs went to museums, collectors, dealers across America. The New York Times covered it. End of an era. Berwind estate liquidated. The article noted that Julia had preserved an authentic Gilded Age household, but suggested this was more eccentricity than preservation. The house itself merited one paragraph. By late July, the Elms was empty. Furniture removed. Art gone, staff dismissed after final paychecks. The building stood hollow, silent, waiting for demolition. 3 weeks. That's how close it came. What saved it wasn't sentiment. Wasn't historical preservation societies recognizing its value. Wasn't public outcry. What saved it was a woman named Catherine Urquhart Warren. Mrs. Warren was a preservationist, though that term barely existed in 1961. She'd spent years documenting Newport's architectural heritage, photographing interiors, cataloging details, arguing that these houses represented irreplaceable American history. But arguing wasn't enough. Newport had lost dozens of estates to demolition. The breakers survived only because the Vanderbilts donated it to the Preservation Society. Marble House became a museum because Alva Vanderbilt willed it with specific provisions. Houses without protective owners disappeared. When Mrs. Warren learned the Elms was scheduled for demolition in 3 weeks, she calculated the only option: buy it herself. The problem: she didn't have $100,000, the purchase price for land and building together. The Preservation Society of Newport County, founded in 1945, had minimal funds. Mortgaging was complex. Time was impossibly short. She started making calls, first to board members, then to wealthy Newport families who might see value in preservation, then to architects, historians, anyone who might contribute funds or influence. She needed $100,000 in 3 weeks. During summer, when decision-makers were traveling, the pitch was direct. This is the last intact Gilded Age household in America. Not renovated, not modernized. Everything original systems, servants' quarters, infrastructure. If we lose this, we lose the ability to understand how these estates actually functioned. It worked, barely. Donations came in increments. $5,000 from one family, $10,000 from another, $2,000 from an architect who'd studied Trumbauer's work. By August 5th, the scheduled demolition date, they'd raised $83,000. Not enough. She called the developers, asked for an extension. 2 weeks. They agreed reluctantly. The wrecking crew was already contracted, and delays cost money. More calls, more fundraising. A breakthrough came from Samuel Sloan, whose family fortune came from textiles. He'd never visited the Elms, but understood the argument. Once demolished, this knowledge is lost forever. He wrote a check for $15,000. August 18th, Mrs. Warren presented $98,000 to the sellers. Close enough. They accepted. The Preservation Society of Newport County took ownership of the Elms on August 19, 1961. The wrecking ball was 24 hours away. What they'd purchased was an empty shell, beautiful, structurally sound, but stripped of contents, devoid of life, a machine that no longer ran because there was no fuel and no reason to operate it. The immediate challenge: what do you do with it? The breakers worked as a museum because it was overwhelming. Gilded Age excess at a scale that visitors could walk through and marvel at. But the Elms was different. Smaller, more refined. Without furniture, without art, it was just rooms. Mrs. Warren had a radical idea: restore it. Not to 1961 condition, but to 1905. Refurnish it, repopulate it with period-appropriate contents. Show visitors not just what it looked like, but how it functioned. Make it educational, not just beautiful. The Preservation Society agreed, but the cost would be enormous. The $100,000 purchase had depleted their funds. Restoration would take years, decades, and there was no guarantee visitors would care about infrastructure and servants' quarters when they could tour the breakers' ballroom. But they tried. Over the next 15 years, the Elms was gradually restored. Furniture acquired from estate sales. Paintings purchased to match the period. Systems documented. Servants' quarters preserved exactly as Julia had maintained them. The narrow iron beds, the coal-burning stove, the third-floor heat. The Elms opened to the public in 1962, 1 year after Julia's death. Initial attendance was modest, but over time, something interesting happened. Visitors started asking different questions, not just how much did it cost, but who worked here, where did they sleep, how did they move through the house without being seen. The infrastructure, the basement boiler rooms, the service staircases, the laundry facilities became as compelling as the ballroom, because it revealed the truth. Beauty this perfect requires machinery this extensive. Aristocratic ease requires industrial-scale labor. The facade only works if the reality stays hidden. By 1976, the Elms was attracting 50,000 visitors annually. What Julia preserved through obsession, Mrs. Warren saved through urgency, and the Preservation Society restored through patience, was something rare. Evidence. Proof of what it actually took to maintain Gilded Age fantasies. But the story doesn't end with successful restoration and steady attendance. There's one more layer, one more truth about what the Elms represents. And it comes from understanding what Julia was really preserving during those 25 years when she refused to change anything. Stand in the Elms today, and tour guides will tell you about Edward Berwind as transformation from piano maker's son to coal baron. They'll describe the construction materials, the architect's credentials, the social season. They'll walk you through servants' quarters and explain the machinery that made beauty possible. What they don't often discuss is Julia. Why did she spend 25 years maintaining a household that made no sense economically, socially, or practically? Why keep 40 servants in the 1950s? Why refuse electric washing machines and oil heat? Why preserve systems that everyone else had abandoned? The simple answer: she was mentally unstable, eccentric, unable to accept change. But the psychological records don't support that conclusion. Julia was lucid, competent, fully capable of managing her affairs. She wrote coherent letters. She authorized necessary repairs. She adapted to other aspects of life. She had a telephone installed. She rode in automobiles. She accepted Social Security when eligible. She changed everything except the Elms. So perhaps the more accurate answer is darker. She understood that without the Elms operating at full capacity, the transformation Edward achieved evaporated. The house wasn't proof of aristocracy. It was proof of performance. And once you stop performing, the audience realizes it was always theater. Julia kept performing because stopping would mean admitting several unbearable truths. Truth 1. You can't actually buy your way into aristocracy. Edward paid for the house, the parties, the furniture, the acceptance. But acceptance isn't the same as belonging. The families who built Marble House and the Breakers descended from Commodore Vanderbilt's railroad fortune. But more importantly, they'd had 3 generations to erase the stench of industry. Edward was first generation. His money was too new. His origins too obvious. Truth 2. Industrial fortunes are unstable. Coal doesn't last forever. Neither do monopolies. Morgan's backing could create an empire, but maintaining it required constant management. When Edward died, the system lost its center. Julia inherited wealth, but she didn't inherit strategic vision or the ability to pivot when circumstances changed. Truth 3. Beauty built on this scale is a machine that eats resources. The Elms at full operation consumed $40,000 annually in the early 1930s. That's $900,000 today. For 4 months of occupancy. The math never made sense. It only worked when the coal fortune was so large that spending was irrelevant. Truth 4. The invisible people were always the point. Edward needed that massive staff, not just for service, but for theater. Aristocracy is defined not by what you have, but by having people whose entire purpose is serving your needs invisibly. Julia understood this. Reducing staff would change the Elms from an aristocratic estate into a rich person's house. The difference sounds subtle. It isn't. By maintaining the household exactly as Edward designed it, Julia preserved the performance. But she also revealed its fragility. Because what happens when the performer dies and no one replaces her? The demolition order. That's what happens. Newport's other estates survived because families evolved them, converted to museums, donated with endowments, found new purposes. The Elms almost died because Julia's preservation strategy depended entirely on her personal ability to sustain unsustainable operations. 3 weeks from the wrecking ball, the Elms' survival came down to one woman as urgent phone calls, and a series of small donations from people who recognized something valuable was about to be lost. Not the house itself. Houses can be rebuilt, but evidence. The complete system. Showpiece rooms and the machinery beneath. The beauty and the cost. The performance and the reality. That's what was 3 weeks from destruction. Not French architecture or Gilded Age glamour, but truth. The kind of truth that Edward Berwind worked his entire life to keep hidden behind perfect limestone walls. Walk through the Elms today, and you'll notice something interesting. The tour route doesn't start in the grand entrance hall. It starts in the basement. Tour guides walk visitors through boiler rooms first. Show them the coal bins, the industrial heating system, the narrow service corridors. They explain that 200 tons of coal burned here annually just to keep upstairs rooms comfortable. Then they climb service staircases, narrow, steep, hidden from sight. The route staff used 50 times daily to move between floors without being seen by family or guests. Third-floor servants' quarters come next. 15 rooms, iron beds, one shared bathroom. Summer temperatures reaching 95 degrees under the mansard roof. These rooms housed 40 people who maintained the illusion of effortless elegance for a family they served, but never socialized with. Only after seeing the machinery do visitors enter the showpiece rooms. And by then, the beauty looks different. Not less beautiful, more complicated. Because you understand that every perfect detail, every polished marble column, every pressed linen napkin, every crystal chandelier glowing in the ballroom required someone's invisible labor to create and maintain. The grand staircase is magnificent. It's also a monument to mahogany shipped from Honduras, carved by craftsmen whose names don't appear in any registry, installed by workers who earn $2 daily, while their employers spent thousands on bronze fixtures for the landing. The dining room seats 30 in exquisite comfort. It is also the end point of a supply chain that required 4 coal men shoveling fuel since 330 A. 3 kitchen maids preparing ingredients since 4. A chef orchestrating 8 courses simultaneously. 4 footmen serving without a single misstep. 3 scullery maids washing dishes afterward. And 3 laundresses cleaning table linens before dawn the next day. So everything was perfect for the next performance. The gardens are stunning. They're also the result of 6 groundskeepers arriving at dawn to deadhead roses, trim hedges, sweep pathways, remove any evidence that nature is messy, and flowers die and leaves fall. This is what the Elms teaches that other Newport mansions do and emphasize. Beauty at this scale isn't natural. It's industrial. It requires infrastructure more complex than most factories. Systems more rigorous than military operations. Labor more intensive than coal mining, which is darkly appropriate given that coal mining paid for everything. But there's another lesson. One more personal. More about human psychology than American history. Edward Berwind spent his entire life trying to erase his origins. Everything, the Navy appointment, the Morgan partnership, the Newport palazzo, the French furniture, the impeccable social performance, was designed to transform him from piano maker's son into someone who belonged among people who never had to transform themselves because they were born belonging. It worked, sort of. He died accepted, respected, celebrated in obituaries that mentioned his business achievements and social standing without dwelling on immigrant poverty. But Julia revealed the cost of that transformation. By maintaining the Elms exactly as Edward designed it, she showed that the performance could never stop. That acceptance wasn't permanent. That the moment you stopped paying for invisibility and infrastructure and perfection, the facade cracked, and people remembered you were always performing. She held on for 25 years because letting go meant admitting Edward's entire life project was temporary. That you can build a French chateau on Bellevue Avenue, but you can't actually become French aristocracy. That coal money can purchase anything except permanence. And when she finally died, developers immediately recognized what they were looking at. Expensive land weighed down by an unsustainable building. The shopping center plan wasn't vindictive. It was logical. The house had no natural constituency, no family to protect it, no endowment to maintain it, just beauty that cost too much to preserve. That it survived at all, that 24 hours before demolition, enough people recognized its value to scrape together $100,000 is remarkable. But it's also revealing. What saved the Elms wasn't its beauty. Other beautiful houses were demolished. What saved it was its completeness. The basement, the servants' quarters, the service staircases, the infrastructure that most estates modernized or concealed or destroyed. Julia's obsessive preservation meant that when Mrs. Warren made her desperate fundraising calls, she could promise something rare. Not another Gilded Age palace, but evidence of what palaces actually required. Today, over 150,000 people tour the Elms annually. They see the grand staircase and the ballroom. But increasingly, they spend more time in the basement and the servants' quarters. They ask questions about wages, working conditions, staff hierarchy. They want to know, who were these invisible people? What did they think about serving a family that could spend their annual wages on a single dinner party? The payroll ledgers don't record feelings. The staff quarters don't preserve diaries. But the structure itself answers. The narrow beds, the inadequate ventilation, the service bells that rang whenever someone upstairs needed something, the call box that summoned servants like machinery. This is the real story of the Elms. Not just that it was beautiful, but that beauty at this scale requires a specific kind of cruelty. Not intentional violence, not personal malice, just the structural reality that maintaining aristocratic illusions requires treating human beings as infrastructure. And the darkest part? Edward Berwind never saw it that way. Neither did Julia. Neither did most of Newport society. The servants were well paid by contemporary standards. They had housing, medical care, steady employment during an era when none of those things were guaranteed. But they also lived in rooms that reached 95 degrees in summer, worked 16-hour days, climbed narrow service staircases 50 times daily, breathed coal dust in basement boiler rooms, and did it all invisibly so the people they served could pretend that beauty happened naturally, effortlessly, aristocratically. That's the truth the Elms preserves. That's what was 3 weeks from destruction, and that's why saving it mattered. Not because French architecture is valuable, though it is. Not because Gilded Age history deserves preservation, though it does, but because evidence matters. Truth matters. Understanding what beauty actually costs in money, in labor, in human dignity matters. Stand in the entrance hall and look up. The ceiling is magnificent. Then turn around and walk down to the basement. Stand in the boiler room where coal men shoveled fuel at 4 a.m. Feel the residual heat from furnaces that ran for 60 years. Both realities are true. The beauty is real. The cost is real. An understanding that you can't have one without the other. That's what the Elms teaches better than any other house in Newport. That's what Julia preserved, even if she never meant to. That's what Mrs. Warren saved, probably without fully realizing it. And that's what remains visible today, complete and undeniable, in a house that was 3 weeks from becoming a parking lot. The truth survives. Barely, but it survives. And it whispers the same lesson that every Gilded Age mansion eventually teaches. Beauty cannot make you immortal. Wealth cannot erase origins. And performance, no matter how perfect, is always performance. Edward Berwind built a French chateau in Newport. Julia Berwind preserved it beyond reason. Catherine Warren saved it from demolition. But the Elms itself, the complete system, infrastructure and elegance together, preserve the truth neither Edward nor Julia intended to reveal. You can buy almost anything in America, except the one thing that mattered most to them: permanence.